In the world of video games, there is only one kind of creation that can simultaneously be the best thing ever or the bane of my entire existence, and that's a remake. Remakes aren't exclusive to games, but due to ever-evolving hardware and due to the fact that every video game company hates video games, there's often a need or desire for old games to reappear in a modern spotlight. Sometimes that's a port to modern hardware, sometimes it's a remaster, which is usually just a couple touch-ups and tweaks, and sometimes it's a developer going back to the source material with a fresh pair of eyes and starting all over again. Although the term remake is pretty inconsistent between games. Some remakes are actually just ports, and sometimes you get a remaster where they remade everything. It's a bit confusing. But anyway, if it wasn't obvious by the thumbnail and the timing of this video, I've obviously been playing Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced, a remake of the original Assassin's Creed 4. It was courteously gifted to me by Ubisoft, which would blow the mind of my younger self, that's for sure. Although I'm not obligated to say anything positive, so this is all just my own opinion. I mean, even if I wasn't given a code, I still would have been incredibly keen to play this, as Black Flag was always my favourite Assassin's Creed game. Overall, I dare say that it is quite a good remake, and it has fortunately, in my opinion at least, lived up to the expectations held for it, which is a rather rare occurrence for a remake. So why don't we sit down and talk about it? First things first, the visuals. They are astounding. Obviously, texture resolution and things naturally all look better due to better tech and hardware, but a big thing I like about the visuals are the colors. When you compare this remake to the original, you might notice two trends, one from back then and one from today. Around the time of Black Flag, a lot of games had a lot of grey and brown. Fortunately, Assassin's Creed 1 was pretty much the only one to straight up not have any color, and so the original Black Flag never really suffered from that trend, but you can see it in bits and pieces of the game where things are a lot darker and desaturated compared to how it might look in real life. Resynced, on the other hand, has areas where you can notice the modern day trend of white lights. Even though when you think sunlight you think yellow, realistically the sun in the middle of the day shines a white light, and in modern games it's actually become a bit of a repetitive problem because a lot of Unreal Engine games just crank the shit out of the white filters and everything, so even non-Unreal Engine games have done the same thing. Next time you play a game made in the last roughly 6 years, try to keep a note of every time you can see white as a color, rather than something being like a bright blue or whatever. But anyway, I bring all that up to say that amazingly, Resynced has kicked that trend in the dick, and there's such a wide variety of colors that all vary depending on the time and day and the weather, and it really does just look astounding. In particular in HDR, the colors just pop so magnificently, and it's all so picturesque. It's almost like the sun itself is a character, the way it brings so much life to every scene. This is actually how the game looked to my small child brain when I first played this on my PS4, and I say that because this game has fortunately been able to achieve what a lot of other remakes cannot, which is to maintain the original game's art direction. Sure, realism tends to be easy to replicate, just make things look like they do in real life, but the plants, the buildings, the boats, and most importantly the colors have been maintained, as it's all based on historical accuracy, yet they've been completely transformed, and combine this with the incredible lighting and the new weather systems, and this is exactly the sort of artistic realism that makes you immersed in what Assassin's Creed has always been, historical fantasy. It looks like real life, but it's exaggerated just enough to look even better than real life. Well, not really, but you get what I mean. As expected, there are also a lot of gameplay improvements, although realistically a lot of these improvements are just them going back and redacting changes made to the Assassin's Creed series over its many years to make this game more like the original Black Flag. So there are some things like a lack of loading screens between areas, which is what it's been like in the modern games like Shadows, which was the previous one, but there are other things like a return to a more traditional Assassin's Creed combat style, or to put it simply, it doesn't play like the RPG games. In terms of the combat, it is different to Black Flag. There's simultaneously a bit more to it and a bit less to it. You can't fight with your hidden blades or fists whenever you want, or pick up weapons off the floor and such, but something Black Flag was actually understandably criticized for back in the day was that the combat essentially boiled down to waiting for an enemy to swing, countering, then chain killing everyone else. I still really miss the combat style of Assassin's Creed 2 and stuff, but if I had to pick between Resynced and the original Black Flag's combat, to be honest, this new style is a bit more engaging. Speaking of things that are engaging, maybe I'll get blindsided by them at some point, but they have completely removed the boring ass sections outside of the Animus. Hell yeah. And they've also reworked tailing missions to make them not a pain in the ass. One of the other things that they added that I really like is the ability to subscribe, which 2/3 of you have not done. And yeah, 6-7 is a funny number, but you know, I'd really appreciate the help. Thank you. The parkour is also massively improved over the recent Assassin's Creed games, but unfortunately still not quite as good as the old ones. Everything is sped up, which makes things visually look a lot less cool, but to be honest, I could tell right from the start that the climbing speed was going to make me a lot more inclined to climb, because in the older ones, you get those synchronization towers, which eventually you just don't want to do anymore, but there's still like 50 left. I know there are many people out there that love posting their clips of parkour in one of the older games where they find a very specific spot that has a bunch of well-placed obstacles and they can just jump around without the game bugging out. But I can tell you, as someone who grew up playing all of these, most of the time you try and do parkour in these games, you will get some wonky shit, or a character will just jump in a weird direction, or an animation will bug out or whatever. It's cool, and you get something like Unity, which looks really cool, but historically it can become quite frustrating, and it seems like the overall simplification of it in this game might alleviate some of those problems. I don't know, but so far in my experience, which there's not been much, I've found that it looks worse, but feels better. And another thing which I feel is a little worse is the stealth, but it's mostly because of the fact that the enemies seem to have eagle vision. I don't know what's up with it, but they will see you or a dead body like a kilometer away, which, yeah, is realistic, but it's a video game. But the enemies are placed more in a way that actually encourages stealth, instead of them just doing patrols where they look directly at each other, which fucking happened all the time in Odyssey, I swear to God. And the last bad thing with this remake is no multiplayer. The original Black Flag was actually the last one to have the old PvP multiplayer, funnily enough, so it's been gone for a long time, but I just want to see it revive one day. Anyway, I'm sure there are more problems I can notice if I went back and played the original, or if I had a million hours in it, but overall, Resynced succeeded in doing what it set out to do, which was to provide new and old audiences with an experience we could all love. A completely new experience that still tastes like what we're used to enjoy. It's not perfect, there are still problems with it, but this is the sort of direction you want with a remake, and I've been saying to my mates for years now that if they did a visual remake of Black Flag and kept as much of what made it Black Flag as they could, that it would be the best Assassin's Creed. So now they've done exactly that, and, well, this is probably the best Assassin's Creed. Now, Black Flag Resynced isn't the only good remake, of course. There are many that I've played that I thought went exceptionally hard, some of which I did play the original version, and others I did not. I've still never played the original Dead Space, but I did play Dead Space 2 prior to the 2023 Dead Space remake, and the remake was just incredible. It was largely thanks to it just kind of being Dead Space 2, but set earlier, you get what I mean? They took pretty much everything good about their best game and put it into their first to make Dead Space 3 look even worse by comparison. Sorry, Dead Space 3, I know it was EA's fault, but still. That remake also pretty much exists thanks to the success and popularity of the Resident Evil 2 remake. I've also not played the original of this, but I do know that they went to great lengths to ensure that fans of the original would love every second of it without ever feeling like they were just playing the same game again. The scares are a big thing. They made a conscious effort to add all sorts of new ones in unexpected places so that even someone who played the original 100 times would be surprised by new things in this game. And another remake I really liked was Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. I ended up loving it so much that I went and played all the other 3D Ninja Gaiden games, as well as the enhanced PS3 version of the game called Sigma 2, which is what's available on modern platforms, but I've still not played the original Xbox 360 version. Black combines the best elements of both the original and enhanced versions of the game with improved visuals, of course, but overall didn't really change much of the gameplay, which is good because despite the fact that it is a 2008 video game, it plays so brilliantly that you won't mind the lack of changes at all. It's good that they remade it, because even though Sigma 2 is available on modern platforms, there are still many problems with it. The first level, for example, has this weird statue boss that kind of kills the pacing halfway through the level and after the original final boss of the level. Or another weird Sigma thing was the censoring of the gore, which it wasn't a problem with the 360 or PS Vita version of the game. Black removed those oddities, but kept many of the Sigma improvements, and although there are still minor problems with Black that fans of the original or the Sigma version have, it basically achieved its goal of making a game that feels modern look modern. But a remake I loved where I did experience the original was Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. It also made a handful of improvements, but at its core was still Xenoblade Chronicles enough to be a perfect way for new players and old fans to enjoy the game. And the reason I bring it up is because of the music. Music is always a really important factor in remakes. Music has also been a really important part of my life. And Xenoblade's soundtrack was one I fell very deeply in love with. A song like Mechanical Rhythm was one that had so much of an impact on me that it actually led to me liking metal metal and heavy rock music, but in Definitive Edition they rearranged all but a couple of songs, and somehow they made the exceptional soundtrack of the original sound like shit in comparison. But I bring up some of these great remakes to point out that not all games can experience the same treatment as Black Flag, Dead Space, Resident Evil, Ninja Gaiden, Xenoblade. And why is that? Well, to be honest, not just in video games, but in basically anything, going back and trying to recreate the good things of the original thing is often quite hard. Cooking a meal exactly like you did it last time, sketching a face, getting a high score, we aren't machines, so we're prone to creating inconsistencies. But in all honesty, a remake should not be, and it should never even aim to be, the same thing again. I was super keen to play Black Flag again because I've been wanting to for a few years now, but for someone who doesn't like replaying games, or someone who just beat Black Flag recently or something like that, you've got to make enough justifiable differences for it to not just be Black Flag, but it looks a bit nicer. Prime example, the reworked telling missions. Remakes aren't ports, nor are they remasters or enhanced versions of a game. Instead, they should be an amalgamation of the three. A remake of an old game should be a way for me to play the game on my modern device like a port, that looks better like a remaster, and that plays better like an enhanced version. But a lot of the time, it feels like developers are just intentionally screwing everything up because they think it's funny. You see, sometimes cutting or changing certain things for the worse can be due to budget or time constraints, but other times it feels like it's due to a lack of knowledge or just pure ignorance. I mean, surely when you're a decision maker on a team working on a remake, your homework should be to play that original as much as you can, or to go online and read up on what the fan favorite songs or levels or mechanics or characters or whatever are. Combine that research into this new package and create something that fans of the original love, which is something that Resynced did, because after the reveal, they were constantly gathering as much feedback as they could and acting on it. Sure, you might argue that you're trying to appeal to a wider audience this time around, but if people who love the original now love it even more, then naturally people who never loved the original would see all this positivity and praise and think to give it a go. If there's some section of a game that sucks ass and everyone says, oh, it would have been a 10 out of 10 if it weren't for this section of the game, and now you go and fix everything wrong with that part or just remove it entirely, boom, you've just made a 10 out of 10 video game. Of course, it's not a matter of doing everything the fans want, because sometimes the fans are dumb shits, or other times you want to bring this old experience to your modern audience, so listening to people who don't engage with your product anymore can hinder you. But then you get some developers where they just go, hey, you know this character or level or whatever that everyone liked? Yeah, we deleted them. Like, why? Yes, your main goal for a remake is to change things, but your top priority should always be to elevate the things people liked about the original. You want players of the new thing to be tricked into believing that the original version was always this good. I loved Final Fantasy XII The Zodiac Age, which had a lot of great enhancements that I've mostly forgotten because I beat it like 8 years ago, but one thing I do know of was that it had a fast forward feature. And to be honest, I have to wonder how much of my enjoyment of the game would have been lessened if I didn't have that feature. In a good remake, a player won't be distracted by the fact that an entire game mechanic is missing or that a certain aspect of the game is really slow or bad or something. Instead, all they'll be thinking about is how good this new experience is. If I played both the original and the new one, I don't want to be reminded of things I didn't like about the original in the sense that I'm experiencing these bad things again. Instead, I should be reminded because I go, oh my god, that's so much better now. Except another issue that developers often run into is that how close the remake is to the original is never a consistent factor. In some cases, an identical game can be boring, like I've said before. If I wanted to play the original, I would just go play the original. But other times, you get things so drastically different that you struggle to even call it a remake, which sometimes can be for the worse, and other times can be Final Fantasy VII Remake, which despite its name, ended up not being a remake at all, and instead became this pseudo-sequel Final Fantasy 17-10 sort of game. They're not the same game, and you can't substitute your experience with 7 Remake for your experience with the original. For me, as someone who did play and enjoy 7 long before 7 Remake was even announced, I was really excited to get a beautiful remake of this game, except it plays like Kingdom Hearts. But when we eventually did get what we got, which was only the first act of the game and had a billion differences, most notably the entire gameplay, I wasn't even remotely bothered. 7 Remake is such a fun and cool game, and sure there are problems, but none of them really stem from it not really being faithful to the source material. But a lot of people, nostalgic for their time with the original Final Fantasy VII, were hoping hoping to relive those memories in a new coat of paint. And if you want to talk about faithful remakes and nostalgia, well, let me send you over to iPhone Camera Mike Me to talk about Pokemon.
Hey y'all, Scott here.
Okay, shut up, iPhone Camera Me. This ended up sounding a lot worse than I was expecting, so I'll just say it here, even though I also sound worse. Pokemon Yellow was the first game I ever played in my entire life, and since then, I've played and still own every mainline entry, and have a lot of time with a lot of the spin-offs as well. But Pokemon Emerald was a very important game for me because it was kinda at the right time in my life where I was learning how to read and learning how to finally start properly appreciating things. Playing through it all and going to the Battle Frontier and all that stuff will forever be some of my most cherished video game memories. And then came Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, which I got the day it released, and from day one, oh my god, I love this game. It's a remake of Ruby and Sapphire, which I did also play as a kid, rather than an Emerald remake, but if you don't know Pokemon, basically it's the same thing. It was so cool though to revisit the Hoenn region in a new way. I love the improvements that came from later generations or modern hardware like online trading and stuff, and most importantly of all, the soundtrack is so goddamn good. It wasn't perfect. I still think the chibi art style for the characters looks bad in 3D. I would have still liked to have had the Battle Frontier, especially after Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Two remakes of two games that didn't have a Battle Frontier had a Battle Frontier. But did you know that outside of the game corner there was only one Thunderbolt TM in Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald? What's up with that? But I felt these issues with the remakes even back when I was a young me in my early teen years loving the shit out of the game. I got to experience an incredibly important game for me all over again, but it wasn't the same game. In fact, it made so many changes that ever since it came out, it was constantly hit with the criticism that it wasn't a faithful remake. Then we cut to another Pokemon game, which was Pearl, which I would show on my OG DS Lite, but it doesn't really work anymore. And this was the first game that I didn't have to share with any of my brothers, so I ended up having hundreds and hundreds of hours in it, and I absolutely love it to death. However, as an adult, I have become aware of the 10 trillion flaws of Diamond and Pearl whenever I've replayed them on a separate save file or even a randomizer. I still love the good parts though, and I knew that if they were to remake it at the same quality as Oras, a game that I love, that it would be amazing. Except, do you want to know what game that I think is dog shit? It's a little game called Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. After complaints that their previous remake was too unfaithful, they got a third party to come in and make the most faithful remake of all time, which meant that it included all of the flaws of the original, besides small things like, oh, this Pokemon has 10 more special attack and is fairy now. Yeah, okay, dude. Even the soundtrack was too faithful. Like, it basically sounded the exact same. And then you get Oras, which, again, went so incredibly hard. I've always beaten every new Pokemon game right after I got it, but it took me a couple of years to force myself back to BDSP because I had so much time in Pearl. I love Pearl, I really do. And for a lot of people, like a lot of kids, for example, this may be their first chance to experience Diamond and Pearl, but they should have known that that wouldn't be their only audience. There were people like me who, if I wanted to go play Pearl, I could just go play it. And I mean, I could even just go emulate the thing on my phone and play it again that way. The way I ended up having fun playing it was having a random ass team. My MVP for the whole playthrough was a Crobat. Crobat sucks, but that was the only way for me to make it feel different, which I shouldn't have to be the one tasked to do that. But anyway, I've been fortunate enough in my gaming experience to not have played very many bad remakes, well, except for Yakuza Kiwami 3, even ones that people, well, let's just say, don't prefer over the original. A lot of the time, the developers achieve the bare minimum of what they need to do. It's a remaster, but Final Fantasy X HD had problems with the faces looking kinda ugly compared to the original PS2 version, and a lot of people also didn't prefer the new soundtrack over the original, but 10 HD was the version I played, and Final Fantasy X, I think, is one of the best turn-based RPGs ever made, an opinion which I developed from playing the remaster. It's available on modern platforms, it allows you to experience the peak that is 10 in a much higher resolution, and it contained enhancements from the international version of the game, which those of us in PAL actually got, but NTSC regions like North America never got those on the PS2. It did its job of breathing new life into an old game, not perfectly, but still. Overall, there's a wide range on what can be good or bad in terms of remakes. Sometimes you can change everything and it can suck balls, like Kiwami 3, and sometimes you can change everything and it becomes your favorite game of 2020, like what happened with me and 7 Remake. Unfortunately for video game developers, there is no true answer on how to make a remake. It's always dependent on what you're remaking, or what the scale is, or what the goal is, but one thing that in my experience has at least worked for every remake I've played is that highlighting the good in an original work and shaving away, removing, replacing, or fixing the bad never fails. Studying the original work, analyzing what's good and what's bad, gathering the opinions from those that loved it and even those that hated it, using this knowledge to not just make the same game again, but make something entirely new. That's what you want to do. Its heart's the same, it's pumping the same blood, it sounds the same, it looks the same, It even feels the same. Weird, it's the same thing, right? Except it's not, you see. People don't walk away thinking, boy, I enjoyed that remake of Resident Evil 2, do they? They think, I enjoyed the Resident Evil 2 remake. You get what I mean? It's a new experience for both fans of the original and people who have never even touched Resident Evil. It is not just Resident Evil 2 again, and that's because in a remake, you are not copying the original, you are not replacing the original, you are remaking it. And if none of that little conclusive paragraph makes any sense, long story short, just don't do what they did with Kiwami 3.